I'll just go ahead. All right. Okay, well today, week 2, we are gonna, did you watch the video?
I did.
And Dan did, I know you guys both did. So you learned all about our unintentional models and what our brain sort of naturally offers to us, right? Today we're gonna be stepping into the intentional models and taking full responsibility in how to do that through using intentional models. But I have a question, like how many of you were able to run a few models this week? Did you do a little bit of thought work during the week and practice it all? Laura did? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good for you. Star student. Give you a sticker. Did you find that it was pretty easy? Did it feel a little harder than you expected?
I've been doing something a little bit in a different way.
Uh-huh.
Like for example, my sister.
Uh-huh.
We are helping my mom. She's totally dependent,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like telling me, "No, do this way, that way," and like it was like my time to help her, and I was doing it my way.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, so started
Didn't
feel
like it. Like,
irritated.
I'm invading my space. It's like this is my time, so I'm gonna spoil my mom as I want.
Uh-huh.
So I remember that later on I say something back to her that she didn't like,
Uh-huh.
and then I thought, oh, she's doing her best.
Oh,
and
good.
she is trying to help me, and I just taking the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
And that changed me the way I reacted.
Okay, I love that. So you already kind of try to switch to a better, more useful thought.
Yeah.
You notice like, oh, thinking that she's just invading my space and she shouldn't be telling me how to do this was making you feel frustrated, and then you kind of snapped or whatever. So you can kind of see the model there, right? And then she kind of moved to a better, more useful thought automatically. So that's awesome. Oh no, you got to be kidding me. See, Dan, what I tell you? This is what I was talking about. I was just telling him, like, everything works wonderfully until...
It's just on there.
There we go. Okay, let's see. Now... Sorry.
We're all judging you right now.
I know you are, and you're so harsh in your judgments, too. Okay, how do I get to the... There we go, slideshow. Okay, perfect. Oh, technology. I just feel like I'm at the mercy of technology. I gotta do some thought work about technology because we just don't get along very well. Anyway, okay, so I saw a post on Facebook the other day that I thought was really interesting. It was a friend of mine. They were getting ready to go out, her and her husband, to like some work dinner, and she kind of got dressed up. And she posted a picture. This is not her. I just took this picture from, I didn't put my friend up there. This is not her. But she posted a picture of she and her husband, and then she said, "Here's to a husband who makes me feel beautiful no matter what I weigh or wear." Okay, which is lovely, right? A lovely thought. But hi, come on in, Sandra. How are you? Hey, sweetie. Anyway, I found this really interesting. Does anyone want to take a guess at why I thought this was really interesting, her post, what she said? Here's to a husband who makes me feel beautiful no matter what I weigh or wear. Why is that interesting? Because we know that no one else can make us feel any way. Her husband can literally not make her feel beautiful. If she felt beautiful, it was because of what she was allowing herself to believe and what she was thinking, right? So let's hypothesize here for a minute, okay? So let's assume, I'm just going to make some assumptions. I didn't call her up and get all weird and tell me what you were thinking. But let's just make some assumptions. Let's assume that maybe she got all dressed up, they're ready to go out, and her husband said something like, "You look so beautiful, I'm such a lucky guy." Okay? Nice, lovely thing to say. And then she must have been thinking something like, "Wow, he thinks I'm beautiful, even though I've gained some extra weight. I'm so lucky." And if she's thinking that, then she's probably going to feel some appreciation for her husband. She might also feel like more peaceful about her own self and her body. She might feel more confidence, right? We don't know how she felt, so these are some of my guesses. And then if she's feeling, "Oh, I'm so lucky, he thinks I'm beautiful even with my extra weight," and she's feeling that, then her actions, I'm guessing, might look something like, She shows up during the evening with more love and appreciation and affection for her husband maybe, and she feels more confidence, at least around her husband, right? I mean, her confidence level might wane and might be different when it comes to what she's thinking other people are thinking about her, but she might feel more confidence with her husband. And in the end, she enjoys a lovely evening out. And then that result, let's see how we can figure out how to tie it to the thought line, remember? The result might be she feels beautiful, loved, and lucky. And that's because she's believing, oh, he thinks I'm beautiful. I'm so lucky, right? Okay, now, is there any other way that she might interpret? Because remember, our feelings come from our thoughts. And so it's lovely. I love that she was allowing herself to feel beautiful, loved, and lucky and all of that. But can you envision a woman who might feel something different, even if the circumstance doesn't change? Let's assume her husband says the same thing. Okay, you look so beautiful, I'm a lucky guy. Any other thought, any other way she might could choose to think?
Oh, you can go a lot of different ways.
What are some of the other thoughts you think?
She could probably think that like, oh, he's telling me this because he wants to go out with his friends. And
Okay.
You know, they're like other thoughts that we might have.
So she's thinking she might be thinking like, oh, why is he saying this? Questioning his motives. Like maybe he's trying to get something, a little leeway or whatever. Okay. I thought it's possible. I know I've been guilty of this. My husband gives me a compliment and I'm like, well, you have to say that. You're my husband, right? Do you know people who sometimes struggle to just take a compliment and own it and just like, no. They want to dismiss it for whatever reason, right? So I thought it's possible she could have thought, well, he has to say that. He's my husband. He has to say that. I know I look so fat or I've gained so much weight or whatever, right? Whatever thought she has going on in her head. So if she were thinking that, then she would feel something like, probably she would feel unattractive, maybe insecure. If she was feeling unattractive, insecure, her actions during the evening might look something like she dwells on the extra weight throughout the night. She shows feeling a little bit insecure. And she's more resistant to her husband's love and affection. And then the result would be she believes. Now, I remember we like to try to see how can we tie this result to the thought. So I put he has to say that. Now she believes she has no choice but to feel bad about herself and her appearance and her weight or whatever. Like she's just believing that is her truth, that she doesn't look good, she's unattractive, she's overweight, whatever it is, right? So that would tie back to her thought. Okay, so I want to illustrate this further because I know I'm going to feel a little bit like a broken record, but it's because I really, like we said before, we have awareness and then acceptance and then we have adjustments. And the awareness and the acceptance are kind of the tricky part. Well, all of it's a little tricky, but that acceptance, I really want to work on acceptance and us believing that no, it really is our thoughts that create what we're experiencing. So let's just hypothesize with this a little bit further. Let's assume she doesn't have this wonderful, lovely husband who told her she looks so beautiful, he's such a lucky guy. And maybe he said something actually that we would consider rude or hurtful, okay? So maybe he would say the words, husband says, well, you've really gained a lot of weight, haven't you? Or something like that, right? Okay? Every one of us is kind of cringing because we're just like, right? Like we're immediately feeling like there is only one way to feel about a comment like that or react to a comment like that. So what would be our natural reaction if those were the words he spoke? You really gained a lot of weight.
Hurt, insecurity.
Yeah, okay, those would be our feelings. So I thought the thought would be maybe something like, he's not happy about the way I look and doesn't find me attractive. Okay, so if she's thinking, well, he's obviously not happy about this and he doesn't find me attractive, then her feelings would probably be hurt, insecure, feel unattractive, right? And then in her action line, she might have actions that are sort of like she pulls away, she's kind of standoffish throughout the evening, she shows up with more insecurity around her husband, she's a little bit cold, whatever, right? And then the result would tie back to her thought is now she's unhappy and feels unattractive. Okay, see how that ties back to what she was thinking? He's unhappy and doesn't find me attractive. Now she's unhappy. Remember, in the result line, we don't put the result for another person, we put our result. Okay, But is this the only way to feel about a comment like that? Now, it would take some practice, it would take some thought work, it would take some intentional thinking, right? But there are other thoughts that she could go to in that circumstance. Circumstance is the same. Husband says, you've really gained a lot of weight. I put another option that she could think is, he's having a hard time accepting my weight, and I totally get it. I am too. Now, is there some truth to that as well? So I love that one of the things we can often do is when someone offers criticism, what we'd call criticism to us, is sometimes we can just say, hey, I sometimes think that about myself too. Like in this case, yeah, I get it. Like I'm a little unhappy about my weight as well. Like I totally get it. You're a little unhappy. I'm a little unhappy. I get it. This is natural. You know what I mean? And then if she thought that, he's having a hard time accepting my weight, I totally get it, I am too, then she might feel a feeling like a little bit of understanding, maybe a little bit of patience for him, who knows. And then the action might be that she might share her own frustration with him. Yeah, I know, it's so frustrating, I'm trying, or that's whatever, right? She might share some of her own frustration and validate his feelings. Like, yeah, I know, it's kind of disappointing, frustrating, whatever, like I'm not loving it either, I'm working, whatever. And then her result would be she finds common ground with her husband, and maybe she asks for his support even, right? And that would tie back to the thought in that, see right here, I totally get it, I am too. Now she's creating sort of a commonality, a common feeling between them. Okay, so that was a lot of hypothesizing, but I really want to drive this point home, that it's not the circumstance that creates the way we're feeling and the results in our lives. So I thought to myself, okay, what do I have in my life? Like let's get a real life scenario. And the most interesting one popped up this week, so it was perfect. So let me tell you a little bit of the backstory on this. My husband isn't really living with us right now. He only comes out on the weekends, and he's living about 3 hours away in Mexico. And when this change first took place, a couple weeks into it, my 2 teenage daughters were really missing their dad and, all the things. So they decided that they both have laptops that they take to school with them, and they have downtime in between classes or after they finish schoolwork and stuff, and they decided that they were going to start writing little notes to their dad during their downtime. And it's so cute. They almost use it as a little journal entry. They just kind of tell them what's going on in their day and what's great and what's not so great and what they might be struggling with or what they're looking forward to. They always end their little letters with how much they love him, how grateful they are he's their dad, just a super sweet note, okay? So it's awesome because he comes on the weekend and then they send him home with a little envelope for each day of the week that he's going to be away, so that every day he has a little letter to pull out and read. So I'm literally legit envious. I'm I want this little insight into my teenage daughter's lives, and oh, they say such nice things about you, and I've read a few of them, not all of them, but I'm just this is the most amazing thing, so sweet, so thoughtful, I'm jealous, right? So let's take a guess at what my husband's model might be about this circumstance. Okay, so in his circumstance line, we just simply put he receives letters from his daughters, right? Now, what kind of thought do you think you might have about it?
As the wife?
No, my husband.
Husband.
Okay, so my husband. We're in his model for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is he thinking? Laura, you said something.
They love me. They appreciate me.
Yeah. Okay, something really. They love me so much. Okay, and if he's getting these letters, he's reading them, he's thinking, oh, my girls love me so much. Then he might feel, I put appreciation, which you touched on, he might feel so much appreciation for his daughters. And then in that appreciation, he just enjoys the letters. He feels close to his daughters even though he's away. Okay? And then the result would be he feels loved because he's thinking they love me so much, and now he feels loved. Well, guess what? I was blown away. And I have permission from him to share this. But this last week, they handed him their letters as they left to school. I saw him tuck them in his backpack, and I saw a whole stack of unread letters, unopened, unread letters in his backpack. And I was like, what? What? Like, you're not reading the girls' letters? What? Why not? I was just like flabbergasted, like, what in the world, you know? This led us into a little conversation. Come to find out, guess what? The letters are not making him feel loved. What? How could this be, right? Right? Okay, so this led to a whole little thought work session with us. And it was awesome because we both understand this. And like, well, let's get to the bottom of this. Why? Like, most of us would think you'd feel so loved. What are you thinking, you know? Anyway, so what we discovered is that he gets the letters, he reads the letters, and then he thinks, I'm not there for them. And he's thinking like, I'm the dad, I'm the parent, it's my job to be the one lifting them and building them and supporting them, not the other way around. They're not supposed to be supporting and lifting me, and like sometimes they share little tidbits about what they might be struggling with in their lives, and then he's like, I'm not there, and he has all this stuff going on in his brain about how he's not there for them. So if he thinks the thought, I'm not there for them, then what feeling will he feel? Guilt, yeah. And he is feeling guilty when he reads their letters. And when he feels guilty, what's in his action line? What did we discover he's doing? He's not reading the letters. He stopped reading the letters, and he feels just bad about being away. Every time those letters get handed to him, or it's like they just stir up this guilt within him, right? And then the result is now he's not allowing them to be there for him, right? He's thinking, I'm not there for them. And now as much as they are trying to be like a support for him, he's not allowing them to be there for him. Isn't that fascinating? It's just fascinating. I really want to drive this home. So I spend a little bit of time on this. Like, I want to drive home that it's not the circumstance that creates our feelings, it's our thoughts. So, okay, I thought that was just a fun illustration from our real life week. So the reason why it is challenging to, well, sorry, I'm getting a little distracted because I realized I wanted to say something more. So here's the thing. We need to remember, and the most empowering position we can be in is to truly believe. No, it's me. It's my thoughts. It's my choice. This is my responsibility. When we delegate our responsibility to other people, to a spouse, to children, to bosses, to circumstances in your life, we are disempowered. We're giving them the power, and now we are at their mercy, and we're a little bit in a victim position, right? So, and what's interesting about that is when we sort of want to delegate responsibility to other people for our own happiness or our own emotions, we show up in weird ways in our relationship with them. It looks a little bit like emotional manipulation, fear tactics maybe with our kids, withholding love and acceptance, and there was another thing I wanted to mention. Oh, guilt trips, right? When we say something like, oh, you make me, oh, that makes mommy so sad, or you make me feel so bad, or that really hurt my feelings. Now listen, here's the thing. It is not a problem that we speak this way, that we say things like, you hurt your brother's feelings, you need to apologize. Or, oh, my teenage son is driving me crazy. Or, my husband is just so insensitive, he doesn't understand. It's not a problem that we speak that way as long as we know what's true. Because here's the thing, it would be super weird if we all decided to start walking around and trying to speak like in complete circumstances. We would be saying to our child, like, now listen, Billy, you can't really control how other people feel about themselves. But if you say those words, he might choose to feel bad. Like, you know, kids are not going to get it. We're not going to walk around saying like, oh my gosh, my teenage son, he wrecked the car this week, and then I had thoughts that made me feel so angry and frustrated with him. You know, we're not going to say things like, I forgot to deposit money and we overdrew in our account, and then my husband had thoughts that made him feel frustrated, irritated, and then he spoke words to me, and I chose to have thoughts that made me feel, you know, like we're not going to go into this all complex scenario of how like, I know I own it and it's my responsibility. We're just going to speak the way we do. And the way we speak sort of insinuates that other people and other circumstances outside of us are responsible for our emotions. And that's fine. We're not going to change the way we speak. We're not going to be turned into a bunch of weirdos. But we are going to know within us what's really, truly happening. Okay? Okay. And the reason why that's tricky to do is because of mirroring emotions. Mirroring emotions is just something That comes natural. Someone comes in with a certain vibe or energy, and we just kind of tend to match it. Have you ever woken up in the morning, you're in a perfectly fine mood, everything's good, and then your kid gets up and they're just Mr. Grumpy, and they're this and that, and before you know it, now you're grumpy, right? We tend to mirror emotions. It's just the natural thing to do. Sometimes it serves us really well. Someone comes in with a lot of excitement and energy about something, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm kind of excited now. So mirroring emotions isn't always a problem, but if it is creating a problem for you, that's where you need to know, this is an option. I do not have to mirror emotions. Because here's the thing. We literally cannot feel other people's emotions. Do you guys remember what the explanation we had last week for? Remember my super sciencey explanation for how emotions are created? What creates our emotions, Dan?
Our brain sends a signal to our body, which secretes different hormones, cortisol, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin.
Yeah, exactly. Based on what we're thinking, our brain sends a message to our body to release certain chemicals and hormones into our bodies, and then those have to process through our bodies, creating sensations and vibrations and all kinds of things. We literally feel them in our bodies processing through. And so your hormones and chemicals could not jump into my body. It's just not what happens, okay? So here's what happens. You share a story with me, I tend to choose to think similar thoughts to what you might be thinking. And so you're creating emotions for you, and now I'm choosing to think similar thoughts about your circumstance or whatever is going on in your life that also now those emotions for me within myself. But it is always optional. Now, I know that some people believe that maybe they're an empath. Have you heard that term? Some people truly believe, no, I just really feel people's emotions. It's I'm just extra sensitive. It's somehow they just sort of I absorb their emotions or whatever. And that's fine. I mean, there's even scientists that will say that's a thing or whatever. And who knows? To be honest, it's possible. It's possible that some people really do have the ability to feel other people's emotions. I don't know. Maybe it's some kind of spiritual gift they are given. I don't know. But what I do know is the reality is, for the majority of us, that is not what happens. We do not absorb other people's emotions. We do not feel their emotions. Our emotions are created from our thoughts. And so I just tend to think the most useful way for me to believe is that not that I'm absorbing someone's emotions, but that I am creating my emotions. That is just what's most empowering for me, okay? So someone who might want to believe they're an empath, if that works for them, if that helps them and serves them well in some way, great, right? But for the majority of us, that's just not the situation. Okay, so a lot of times we do not realize that we are mirroring emotions. It can look something like, my mother-in-law shouldn't be all up in my business. Believing that and feeling frustration about that, and then guess what? I'm all up in her business, I'm super judgmental about how she's playing the role of mother-in-law, yet I'm not even a mother-in-law, so what do I know about being a mother-in-law? And now I'm all up in her business about how she should be in her life because she's up in my business about how I should be in my life, okay? So we're mirroring there. How about you're upset that you're judging them, right? And this is the most obvious one, you're yelling at your kids for yelling at each other, right? This is the one we're all guilty of. How about you're getting really stressed that your spouse is really stressed, right? And maybe you're well, it feels compassionate, and that's fine if it feels compassionate to you to just maybe empathize or feel some stress. But the reality is, we have to carry the stress. And is it really that helpful for now not just one person to be stressful, but feel stress, but for both of us to be carrying stress? Not really. It's not really serving any greater purpose, right? How about when you're complaining about how negative someone is? So pessimistic, they're just so negative. Well, now look at you. Now you are sort of being pessimistic and negative, right? How about when you're upset that someone else is upset? Okay? So these are some of the ways that we mirror emotions. Let's see. So just knowing this, just simply knowing okay, mirroring comes naturally, but it's literally my choice. I cannot feel someone else's emotions. I'm creating those emotions for me. Oh, I wanted to give this example. For example, when we were talking about how we might it might feel like we feel someone else's emotions because we hear their story or their struggle, and now we are feeling what we believe they're feeling. So here's a good example. Have you ever read like a post on Facebook and it's something super sad? Maybe someone's child is in the hospital and they're really struggling and they're in pain and they need a transplant and the whole family's, it's just like some really sad story, right? You're reading this story and you suddenly are now feeling super sad and heartache for this person, and you almost cry over it. It's like, I don't even know this person. You could literally not know the person, not be anywhere near them, but now you are creating emotions similar to what you believe they're feeling because you're probably thinking thoughts similar to theirs. Or have you ever been in church where they share like some really inspiring pioneer story, yet it's somehow very tragic all at the same time, right? And you're just sympathizing and, oh my gosh, that would be so hard, and the struggles, and how did they do that? And now you're just feeling this angst for them and this heartache for them or whatever. They didn't even live in your lifetime, right? They did not even live during our lifetime. So it's not possible that we are taking on their emotions. It's because we're choosing to think thoughts similar to what we believe they are. So just really, I know, again, I sound like a broken record. I really want to drive home that it's our thinking. Okay, so here's the thing. Sometimes we want to feel bad. We do. We just want to feel bad. This is why I want to talk about clean pain versus dirty pain. Because I describe clean pain as like whatever emotion that's sad, that's heavy, that's not pleasant, as necessary. It almost feels necessary, especially if you're like a parent or a spouse and you just really care, a daughter, someone you really care about is struggling. It might almost feel like the compassionate thing to do. Just go ahead and feel all that heaviness and all that sadness with them or for them, right? And so that compassion, by the way, is not just for other people. Sometimes it feels like the compassionate thing to do for ourselves, to allow ourselves to feel whatever it is that we're struggling with. We might need to just want to feel like we just need to be angry for a little bit. Now, so clean pain sort of feels compassionate towards others or towards yourself, and it feels healing. Like, have you ever had like just a really good cry and then it was just like, oh, okay, like I just needed that. It just had some sort of healing effect on my life, right? But where it crosses the line into dirty pain is when that emotion is just sort of destructive. It's not serving any purpose. It's not helping you. It's not helping to find a solution. It's sort of destructive and disempowering, right? And that means like, okay, maybe you do want to allow yourself just to be angry for a little bit. But guess what? When you're angry, 3 days later, 2 years later, whatever it is, right? This is no longer serving you. And it was probably compassionate to just allow yourself, like, that made me angry, to allow yourself to feel it. But when you're holding on to it and you're just like, I don't want to feel this way anymore, and it's not creating solutions, it's not improving relationships, now it's sort of destructive and disempowering. And I like this picture because notice how this is what we tend to do. We sort of tend to think that when we have this attitude, we are somehow in the powerful position. Okay, we're just determined to be angry at someone. We're determined to withhold love, whatever it is. We sort of feel like we have the power and control, but just the opposite is true. Really, really, what she has done is she is 100% delegating responsibility person for her emotions. Now she's the victim in all of this, and she is also in a place where she's just shut down and not ready to find any better way to feel. Does that make sense? So sometimes we want to it almost feels like justified, and so because something's justified, we think that's like a good enough reason to like hold on to an anger or feeling. But remember, you're the one who has to feel the feelings, right? You're the one. So you might be justified, but do you want to be carrying around that feeling? Okay, so here's what's so interesting. Absolutely everything we think we want in our lives, a goal we want to reach, a raise we want to get, choices we want our kids to make, like whatever it is that we think we really want in our lives, it always boils down to a feeling, because we think where everything that we want is because of what we think it's going to make us feel. So let me illustrate this a little bit. I promise you that, well, let me give the example and then it'll make more sense. Okay, let's say someone wants to make more money. Okay? Why? Why do you want to make more money? Well, I mean, I don't know. We have plenty. Like, we live comfortably, but it would be so cool if we could take vacations as a family. Okay, great, vacations. Why do you want to take vacations? Well, I just want our family to be making memories together. Okay, great. Why do you want your family to have memories together? Well, because I want us to feel more bonded and connected as a family. Okay? Connected is a feeling, right? Now, tell me why else you want to make more money. Well, we could have a bigger home. Okay, why do you want a bigger home? Well, because we would have more space, and then that would just mean we would be more comfortable. Okay, great. Comfortable is also a feeling. How about, I really want to make more money because then I just feel like, you know, we could save more and our savings accounts could grow. So why do you want more money in savings? Well, then because then we could invest in some things. And why do you want to have some investments? Well, because then I would feel more secure. Okay, so security is also a feeling. So connected, comfortable, and secure are all feelings. And here's what we do. We know how we want to feel. And so what we do is we look outward. We're like, okay, what out there or who out there can help me to feel that way? And we think that, you know, getting a certain circumstance in our life is going to create that feeling for us. But the truth is that how you feel is determined by your thoughts. And any feeling you want is available to you whenever you're ready to choose it, by choosing thoughts that will help you feel that feeling. Are there other ways to feel security, comfort, connection? Does it have to come from vacations? Does it have to come from investments? Does it have to come from a bigger house? No, there are other ways to create within you. And of course, like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time illustrating all of that right now for the sake of time, but that's what we're going to be doing throughout the course of this course, is we're going to be learning, okay? We think it's something outside of us has to change. Someone has to change. Something has to change. No. What's going to change is our thinking, and we're going to get to the feelings we want. And what's so awesome is that, kind of got a little out of order here, but that's okay. Here's the thing. Well, so what? We're just not supposed to want, like, more or better or whatever. Of course. Like, actually, I think it's a beautiful thing that we always sort of want to aspire to something more. And I believe that's the way God intended us to be. He created us that way because we're all sort of humans that want to, like, expand and grow and improve. And that's personally, and we want our lives to follow that trajectory as well. So of course we're going to want things, and there's no problem with wanting. There's only a problem if you think you have to have it. You need those things in order to feel happy. So we can want ourselves, others, and our circumstances to change all day long. There's not a problem with wanting it as long as we don't need it to feel better, because then again, we're in a disempowered position and we're sort of in victim mode again. So that kind of sounds like this. If only blank, then I could believe that my life is great and that I'm enough. Well, guess what? You can choose to believe that your life is great and that you are good enough now without that thing. But the cool thing, so here we go. Here's the example with money. Once I make more money, I'll enjoy my life more. I'll feel more comfortable and secure. So if that is what you're believing, that sort of the money is what's going to give you the comfort, the security, the joy, then what emotions are motivating or driving your money making? My guess is something like need, desperation, because you're really believing that it's the money that's going to give you the joy, the happiness, security, connection, overwhelm, stress, right? Do those sound like useful emotions for driving your action when you are attempting to make more money? Do they sound fun and enjoyable? I mean, they might be a little useful in that we can all operate out of willpower, like we talked about last week, right? Like, willpower is a legit thing, grit. So they might be a little bit useful, but they certainly don't sound like the most enjoyable way to go about making more money. If you can get to a point where you can really believe, look, I have a rich, full life. I have all that I need and more, but making some more money sounds like it could be kind of fun. We could do some cool things. It could just be a fun experience. I would love to see how I can learn and grow, what I can create. But believing all the while, I don't need it to feel better because I already have a rich, full life and I already have all that I need and more, right? This is what people say, let's operate out of abundance instead of scarcity, right? And if that's what you can get to that point and you can believe that way, then you're going to be making money driven by feelings of gratitude, motivation, excitement, right? Much better fuel for our action than need, desperation, overwhelm. Can you kind of picture someone, let's just say you're at a car lot and someone wants to sell you a car. Someone who's selling you a car out of desperation feels completely different. The whole experience is very different than someone who's selling a car out of excitement and motivation and this is going to be so great. You know what I mean? Their focus is sort of on you instead of their needs. I need this sale, right? I've got to have this sale. So we can kind of envision that, right? All right. So here's the thing about our brains. I like to think about our brains as if they're sort of my mind is like a little library up there. And there's this really cute little librarian in there. She's so sweet and she tries to be so helpful. But honestly, most of the time she's not very helpful to me because here's what she does. She's got all these little file folders of thoughts. And anytime I find myself in a circumstance or a situation that I've been in before, or it's similar to other situations, then she's like, oh yeah, I know this one. This one's the circumstance about a husband who didn't want to help or didn't do what you asked him to do or whatever. Okay, pull out the card. Or this is the circumstance about didn't get invited to that lunch out with the girls or whatever. Oh, we know right where to go. She pulls out the little file folder. She pulls out the thought that's filed first and foremost right there and offers it to us in our brains, right? Why? Because it's just the easiest to access. It's the one we tend to always go to. These are what our primary limiting beliefs are. And so as we're doing this work over the next few weeks, I want you to start to see if you can notice, interesting, I have a couple of primary limiting beliefs that sort of show up in all areas of my life. And the cool thing about when you can discover what some of your primary limiting beliefs are, and start to work on those and sort of loosen them up, maybe even get to the point where you shred it, then you're going to see that actually affects all areas of your life, even though you're not going to be looking into every area of my life, but you're just going to do some work in one area and it's going to ooze into the other areas of your life. So what that means is that we have to literally take those thoughts out and be willing to really look at them. Remember that if you suppress thoughts that you're like, ooh, that is an ugly thought, or I know that thought's not serving me, and you just choose to suppress it or try to ignore it, you might think that you're doing some good, but you're not. You know what's happening? It's just getting filed right back into the folder, the very front. It's going to be the first thought you access. The way to really get leverage over those thoughts is to be willing to really look at them. And that's what we use the model for. We're really going to look at them and determine if they're serving you well or not. Some of them we're going to decide to toss or shred, and then we're going to replace them with new thoughts, new library cards that we're going to stick at the front of the file folder and practice redirecting and rewiring our brains, right? So you're going to want to start noticing what are some of your primary limiting thoughts and how are they working for you. Okay, so remember that the 3 steps of thought work are awareness, and then acceptance, and then adjustment. And I want to just say a little something about, I'll put in a little tip for the awareness and the acceptance. Like I just said, make sure that when you start becoming really aware of your thoughts, you do not get critical of your thoughts or yourself. Don't use this to beat yourself up. Don't do your thought download and put it all out on paper and then look at it and just be like, oh my gosh, I'm a mess and I'm such an emotional toddler, or whatever it is you might want to think, or that's so un-Christ-like, or how could I really think that about my own mom or my own child or whatever. Don't get judgmental and critical of them, because what that does is send those thoughts into hiding. and then you don't have the power and the leverage over them. So make sure you're just compassionate and you're willing to observe your brain almost as if it's like a separate entity from yourself. Like, isn't that interesting that my brain thinks that? Wonder why my brain wants to believe that. What could be going on? And just sort of have compassion for yourself in the process. Okay, and the most useful way to get really good at that is doing lots of models, running lots of models. Okay, the better you get at running models, the better you get at, the more leverage you gain over your thoughts, and the better you're going to get at managing your emotions. So don't dismiss these little activities when I'm like, run some models, practice this. You've really got to do it on your own. It's the work you've got to do on your own. Okay, so there are 3 steps of adjustment. The first one is, okay, we're moving in from awareness, acceptance to adjustment. The first thing you want to do is like, okay, I can see my unintentional model here. I can see what my brain is kind of naturally doing when I'm creating for myself, but how do I want to feel? Okay, the circumstance is not going to change. Given that this person, I can't control this person, I can't change the circumstance, how do I want to feel now? And remember, like I said, you're the one that has to feel your feelings. So even though you might feel justified, even though pretty much the vast majority of people would probably say like, oh yeah, like what our friends do when we go to them our stories, they totally empathize and they what's the word? I can't think of it, but anyway, validate. They validate all our emotions, even though we can be validated by everyone in the world and we can feel very justified, and most people would agree that we're justified. Remind yourself, okay, I might be justified, but I have to feel it. So do I want to continue this? So you can start anywhere in the model, okay? You can start with how do I want to feel, and then put that in your new model and say, okay, now what thought is going to help me get there? And try to think of a new thought to redirect your brain to. If you don't really know how you want to feel, sometimes we're more aware of like what action we want to take. We're like, okay, how do I want to react when this person says things like that or behaves in this way? I know what I want my actions to look like. Okay, then put your actions there, and then build, and then move backward from your actions. Like, okay, well then what am I going to have to be feeling in order to take those actions, and what thoughts will get you there? Sometimes you just know what result you want, right? So you can start anywhere in the model, whatever's easiest for you to identify that you want, and just kind of start filling in the model from there. Here's the most important thing about choosing a new thought, is that you cannot fool your brain. You have to choose a thought that is at least somewhat believable to you. If you can't at least believe it on like some level, then your brain is going to reject it, right? Like you cannot go from thinking like, this person is impossible to work with. They're just so unreasonable, they're impossible, they're so selfish, to like, oh, this is the most lovely person to work with, they're so reasonable, they're so open-minded. You're not going to be able to go from one extreme to the other because your mind will immediately reject it because you have tons of evidence. You've been choosing to believe they're really, really difficult, closed-minded or whatever. And so when you are thinking those thoughts, what is your brain set to doing? Find evidence for that. Because remember, what the eye sees what the mind thinks or believes, right? So you're going to have tons of evidence for how you think now. So what you have to do is choose a thought that you can at least somewhat believe, that just steps you a little closer to where you want to go. But don't try to take these big leaps, because when we try to take these big leaps, our minds just reject it. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about layering thoughts in just a second. But just know that it has to be at least somewhat believable. If you can't somewhat believe it, it's not going to stick. It's not going to help you. And you're going to have a hard time trying to redirect your brain to that thought. This is why when someone comes to a one-on-one session with me and we're working through their models and they're getting some coaching and they want to feel differently and they want to think differently, it's like the best news ever for me is that I literally have no idea what you should be thinking or feeling. I really, really don't. Like, I genuinely do not think, oh, I know how this person should believe, should think and feel, because I have no idea what thoughts are going to resonate and be believable to them. And what might work for one person, another person's brain might completely reject. And so I'm only there to kind of help you see what your mind is creating and what's going on in your mind. Sometimes I can offer other possible thoughts, other possible ways of thinking about something or seeing something, but really I'm only there to help you discover what your mind is going to accept and not reject. It's like we talked about last week, like when you're inside the bottle and you're trying, everyone else can really clearly read the label, all the nutritional values on the label of the bottle from outside. It's like so obvious, right? At least they think it is so obvious. You know, we all think we know exactly how other people should behave. But when you're inside, it's so much harder to see it because it's your feelings, it's your story, it's super heavy to you, it's very important to you, and we're sort of uninvested, right? So you kind of need that objective outside look. That's the value of having someone else to help you through your thought work. Okay. The next thing is going to be just practice believing that by gently redirecting your brain to the new thought. So your brain is super skilled and super practiced at what you currently believe because you have trained it that way, right? Now remember that now we are going to be rewiring or retraining our brains. And as you gently redirect, and that just looks like this. So you're in a circumstance, your mind wants to say like, oh my gosh, again, he's so hard to work with. And you're just going to be on to your brain. You're going to be like, okay, thank you, little librarian lady. Like, I know you're trying to be helpful, but this isn't helping me. Like, remember, we're not thinking that anymore. What we're going to think and believe is this. And you're going to have that thought ready, right? You just almost want to have it like written down. You almost want to have it like on a screen on your phone or something so that you can remember, no, this is what I'm practicing redirecting to now. When my brain automatically wants to go to this, I have to stop it and I have to redirect it. And then the interesting thing is over time, as you practice redirecting your brain to more useful thoughts, your brain is going to start going, oh wait, she used to think that, but now she's thinking this all the time. Like, okay, and brains want to be right. Like they really want to be right. And so if you're going to redirect your brain to a more useful thought, then your brain is going to set out to looking for evidence for that thought now. And over time, you will begin to find evidence that it's true. Like maybe you think this person's so difficult to work with and you're like, okay, it's possible. This is one way that you make a thought believable instead of just saying like, I'm sure they have good intentions. Your brain might reject that, but you could possibly get your brain to somewhat believe like it's possible that their intent is good, they just don't execute well, or they're not very aware of other people's emotions. It's possible that they have good intentions, but they just lack tact. You know, like whatever. Like you're just going to choose a slightly better thought. And then as you practice redirecting that, then your interactions with this person and your brain is going to set to looking for like, oh, how could it possibly be that this person actually has some good intentions or whatever? And it's going to start finding evidence for what you're now choosing to believe. And then when you get to the point that it's found enough evidence, it's gathered enough evidence that you actually believe it, then you're ready to move on to like the next best thought that's going to get you towards what you want to feel. Does that make sense? So you have to sort of step yourself there. So let's give an example here. This is what we call laddering thoughts. And these are really small, I'm sorry, I know. But here, let me set the stage first before you start to read them. Let me set the stage. Let's assume that you are a parent of a teen, a young adult, a full-on adult, well, whoever. You have an older child, and this child is making choices in their life that you just deep down feel are just not going to be good for them. It's going to create problems. It's going to create sadness and all the things. It's just like not good choices. You're just set on that. You're very sure that this child is just really messing it up. Okay, so you naturally might have some thoughts like, he's making a terrible mistake, and then you're going to feel worried. I kind of put two thoughts and two emotions in each step because it was like my ladder did not have enough rungs. But like, he's making a terrible mistake would make you feel worried. This will create all kinds of problems for him. You might feel stressed. Okay, you cannot go. I know that sometimes, and I love the gospel because really, truly, all the answers to our questions are there, right? But sometimes it's like we just have a hard time taking that leap. So it would be lovely if we could just go all the way to like, I can trust that God's got him and nothing's gone wrong here. That would be really nice. But if you're really truly believing this is terrible, he's going to make all kinds of problems, you just have a hard time, our minds have a hard time leaping there. That is the answer, to trust God, but we have a hard time leaping to that point. So let's just step it a little step closer with a thought like, mistakes are a part of God's plan. True? We all can agree that God didn't expect any of us to come down here and do it perfectly. Like, nobody can, other than the Savior, but the rest of us, we're all going to make mistakes. And he planned on that. And like, that is his plan, for us to mess up. And sometimes it's going to be big mistakes, and sometimes it's going to be little mistakes, but we're all going to mess up. And that might give you a little bit of acceptance. And then none of us is an exception, might bring a little bit of compassion. And then another more useful thought might be like, sometimes mistakes are the best way for people to learn. And you might feel some empathy, because like, yeah, I've made mistakes I've learned from in my life. And then it's possible he'll learn an important lesson. And if you're thinking, okay, it's possible he's going to learn a really important lesson through all of this, you might feel a little bit hopeful that your brain is probably going to say, oh no, but he's not. Like, look at him. He doesn't listen. He's not changing. He's not learning anything, right? So your brain is going to kind of try to reject that. So you might have to go to a thought like, okay, he hasn't learned the lesson yet. And when you think he hasn't learned the lesson yet, then you probably can feel some patience for the process. And you might think like, it's even possible that this path that he's taking is going to be better in the long run than what I had planned for this person. It's possible. But what I love about this is that creates curiosity. If you choose to redirect your brain to like, it's possible that somehow this mess he's creating is going to be to a benefit in his life in some way, or is going to lead him just to where he needs to be, then guess what your brain is going to do? It's going to start to notice all the other people, all the other stories. Movies about inspiration where people are just in the dumps and then they rise. It's going to notice the stories at church. It's going to notice the neighbors who've had kids go off the deep end and yet turn around, right? It's going to find examples of like, oh man, people who just really blew it and then they came back and now they're a motivation and an inspiration and a help to other people. Like, if you direct your brain to think like it's possible, your brain's going to start to notice and find evidence for like, yeah, that's happened in other people's lives. Why not my son? It's possible, right? And so then you might get to like, this is just the messy middle of the story before the happy ending. And I love that thought. I love to think of our lives as like a movie. It's like, well, this is just a part of the movie where it's like we have no idea and we're so stressed and it seems like nothing's going to work out, but there's going to be a happy ending, right? Then you might feel a little bit of relief, like I'm going to trust there's a happy ending to this story. He'll eventually figure this out, some peace. And then you might be able to get to like, I can trust that God's got him and nothing's gone wrong, and just feel some trust and some confidence, okay? So that's an example of how you kind of have to ladder. And what works for one person may not work for another. Like, this thought might not work at all for me, but then your brain attaches and finds and resonates with this thought, right? So we all have to just play with thoughts. I like to think that we have to try on thoughts the way we try on clothes. We're like, put something on, we're in the dressing room, we're like, oh, this color is terrible on me. Washes me out or whatever, right? Or does this make my butt look big, or I just don't feel good in these clothes. And so you try on thoughts. If it doesn't feel good, if you don't think it's something that can work for you, just toss it. And that's the beauty of everything we're going to be learning together. Like, if I offer a thought or an idea to you in this class and you're like, no, sorry, I just cannot believe that one. I just don't think that's true. That's okay. Like, you don't have to, they're thoughts. We've already established that circumstances are factual. Thoughts are full of opinion, right? So everything I'm going to be sharing with you is thoughts. So if something I share and teach thinking that it may be useful to you doesn't feel useful at all, it's fine. You can toss it out. Like, let's just look for what works for you. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so we're going to build a little bit more on this concept. Let me check the time. We go till 11:30, right? Okay, perfect. Because guess what? First thing you're going to think, if you have this son who's making all kinds of crazy choices, is like, oh, this is going to be terrible for him. What else are you might be thinking? Well, what I know is that every one of us makes everything about us mean something about us in some way. We tend to do that. Remember? What's that?
I'm a failure.
Yeah, we all tend to interpret everything that happens in our lives to mean something about us and our value and our worth. It's just human nature. It's just what we all do. So I'm guessing that this person, father or mother, might be like, I have failed as a parent. And then they're going to feel shame, which we've already established is like one of the worst emotions to feel. So what might you think? It would be lovely if you could just think like, oh no, I'm the best mom ever, you know, I've just done it all right. Everything is great. But you're not going to be able to go there if you're really believing like I've somehow totally failed and blown it as a parent. So you've got to step yourself there. You might have to practice directing to like, it's possible that he might have made these choices no matter how I parented. Curiosity. Curiosity is one of the most useful emotions to get to. Because when you're curious, your brain really sets out to like go, okay, well, let's see if there's any evidence for that. And it really gets like, observes. So if you're thinking like, it's possible he could have made these choices no matter how I parented, then guess what you're going to notice? There are a lot of examples of fabulous parents who've had kids make choices that parents didn't agree or didn't teach, right? Like, and you're going to see that all around you. And when you notice that, then you're going to feel some relief because you're going to be thinking something like, even good parents have kids that make choices like these. And then you'll feel some relief. And then, I love this one, maybe God gave me this child because I'm the best person to help him through it. You don't have to believe that you're like a perfect, flawless parent, you've done it all right, but you can believe that maybe I'm the best person to help them through it, and you'll feel more empowered. And then you might think, he doesn't need a perfect parent, he just needs me. There are no perfect parents, but God gave him to me and trusts me, and so I am the best person for him. And why am I the best person for him? Because I love this kid more than anyone else. And so therefore, I am the best parent for this person. Do you see how you get to some confidence, some peace, all the way from here to terrible shame to confidence and peace? But you have to ladder it. You have to sort of step yourself there. Okay, last example, because you know what else you're going to worry about? What everybody else is thinking about you, right? This is what we do. We question our value and worth, and then we're like, what's everybody else thinking too? Do they think I'm good? So most likely you're going to be thinking something like, people are going to think I'm blowing it. And if you think that, you're probably going to feel something like embarrassment. Now here's the thing. I know that my brain, at least, cannot go from people are going to think I'm blowing it to like, oh, no. Well, don't look at that. But everyone thinks I'm the most amazing mom. And like they all want to be like me. And I'm the model of a perfect parent. I'm sure they're thinking I'm doing it great. Like I just can't get there. So what I like to do when I feel that there's some judgment or even spoken judgment that like hits a chord, I like to just accept like, it's kind of true. Maybe I'm not the best parent ever, but no one is. And like you can accept that part of what they might think or say could have some truth in it, but with empathy. It's not like it's true and I'm awful. It's like it's true. Sometimes I blow it. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. We all do. And I'm just learning. And I love me anyways. So you can accept that. So I like to just kind of go like, yeah, they might be judging me. And that's okay. Because my brain's not going to believe that no one's judging me. Like, no, nobody in my ward is judging me or my family or whatever, right? So I just accept. They might be, and that's okay. Then you're going to feel some acceptance. Then you might think something like, I get it. Sometimes I think I'm blowing it too. So like, I can't be critical of someone who's thinking something that I kind of think as well, that I'm kind of blowing it at times. I get it, a little bit of understanding. Then I sometimes judge other people harshly too, right? I'm not like the model of perfect compassion and love all the time. Sometimes I'm critical of other people too. I get it. And then you're going to feel a little bit of compassion. And then you might think like, okay, they can judge me and I don't have to judge them back. Okay, and that is where I like, determination is not like the most lovely feeling, but it is empowering. So they can judge me, I don't have to judge them back. And then you can get to, you know what, it's okay. People can judge me and I can love them anyways, and I can love me anyway. So this is how you slowly sort of step yourself from feeling something terrible, from like embarrassment and shame, to just like love and confidence in yourself. All right, clear as mud? Is this making sense to everybody? Okay, let's see. So let's remember the model. Circumstance has to be factual, because now we're going to move from, we're going to take the models that we showed last week that were unintentional models and see if we can't help find some better intentional models. So you have your circumstance, must be factual, without opinion, and neutral. Now here's the thing. By neutral, we mean that you literally have to believe that it is not good or bad. It just is. It just is. And I can get to that on a lot of things. But I will say that sometimes there are certain circumstances that I really struggle to getting to the point where it's just like, no, I just believe it's neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not positive, it's not negative, it just is. And that's because I have a sort of a set of values that I live from that I'm like, no, some things, they're just bad, right? So what I like to do in that case, let me just give you an example actually. So for example, let's think about Elizabeth Smart. Everybody knows her story, the one that was like abducted from her home and taken and raped repeatedly and gone for 9 months, the whole thing, right? You guys remember the story. So you can take Elizabeth Smart. Like, maybe we don't want to choose to believe that her circumstance was neutral, that it wasn't good or bad. Maybe she cannot get to the point where she's like, no, I don't believe that was good or bad, it's just neutral. Maybe that's too big of a stretch. That's okay. Sometimes I just allow myself to believe that it's neutral in this way, that it is like a vehicle in neutral. It happened, it is what it is, I can't change it, but now I have the ability to push forward with it or to push back. Like from here, I get to determine which way I'm headed with this circumstance that I don't get to change. So it's neutral in that way. Does that make sense to you guys? Because sometimes getting to a neutral place is very challenging. It's the best place we can get to where we can really just believe something is and it's not good or bad or positive or negative, but some things are harder than others to get there on. So if I can't get there, I just allow myself to believe like, okay, I'm really wanting to believe that this is bad, and maybe I don't want to let go of that because it's a part of my values or beliefs or whatever, but I'm going to believe that it's neutral in that now I get to determine what I make of it, right? Which way I move forward in my life. Okay, then they trigger your thoughts. Again, we're going to pick just one thought. Here's the other thing about thoughts. Sometimes there's a thought that I find I just like really, even though I know it's thought and it's not a circumstance, it's not factual, people would argue it with me, I just really strongly believe it's true and I'm not ready to let go of it. The thing to remind yourself is like, okay, you can choose to believe something is true, but that doesn't mean you have to think it all the time. It doesn't mean it has to be your go-to thought. You can just say, all right, I apparently really believe this thought is true about this person or about myself or about circumstance, but I'm going to set it on the back shelf because I realize that it's not helping me. So I can choose to at least redirect to a more useful thought. Maybe I can't just like shred it and let go of it, but I can at least say it's not helping me to think it. So I'm going to put it back there, and maybe for a while I'm still going to believe it's true, but I'm just going to practice redirecting my brain. Does that make sense? Okay, so then you have your thought, and then it creates your feelings, which we're going to put just a one-word emotion. Your feelings fuel your action. Your action line, I love to put lots of stuff in there. This is just one thought, one sentence. This is just one word, but here's where I like to try to notice all that I'm doing, what I'm doing or not doing, what's happening internally and externally in my thought line, because the more you put in your action line, the easier it is to sort of find a way to discover how the result really is evidence for your thoughts. It really is linked back to your thoughts. Okay, so let's go to these models then. Remember, we had the son. He's 9 years old. That's the fact. He's easily upset. Remember, he's really volatile. He struggles with anger management. He throws things, whatever it is, right? That whole story, but we're choosing he's easily upset. We feel frustrated. We fixate on how hard this is. This makes my life so challenging. We get frustrated when they get frustrated. We yell when they yell. We threaten punishments. We escort them to their room. Maybe it looks like some of those things. And then the result is I'm easily upset. Loops back to that. Okay, how else could we choose to think about this? Let's say, same circumstance, the thought I came up with was he can be upset and I don't have to be. I like to sometimes say, okay, I know it's natural for me to want to mirror, but I'm the adult here. Like, he's 9. Makes perfect sense that he doesn't know how to control his emotions, but I'm a 45-year-old adult. So I'm the adult here. He can, and I don't have to be. And that just sort of gives me a little bit of like power and determination, right? And if I'm thinking that, then I might feel some determination. And then my actions might be that, like, I allow his acting out without reacting to it. I still escort him to his room, but then I return later to talk to him when I'm calm. I maybe express some empathy and some love. Like, I get it. I know sometimes I'm super frustrated. Sometimes I think things aren't unfair, and I know how frustrating that can feel. A little bit of empathy for them, and then I enforce a consequence, right, for the behavior. The result is now I'm not upset because I'm thinking he can be upset and I don't have to be, and now I'm not upset. Okay. We're just going to run through several of these. And here's the thing. This week, I'm just going to sort of give it to you because it's all kind of new to us, and I'm just going to sort of fill in an intentional model. Next week is when we're going to come and we're going to sort of get hands-on, and I'm going to want participation, and we're going to look at scenarios, and we're going to all try to decipher and cut out the model together, right? So we're going to practice it next week. This week, I'm just going to kind of give it to you so you can start to get a feel for how you can move from your unintentional to your intentional. So we had traffic that was moving approximately 10 miles an hour. We couldn't say it was terrible because that's subjective. I'm going to look terrible when I show up late to this meeting. That's your thought. Then your feeling would be you're anxious. When you get there late, you're like overly apologetic. You're kind of flustered. You're rushed. And you just kind of look bad, right? Because you were believing you're going to look terrible. So how else might you think about this? Same circumstance. I put that you might be able to think, like, listen, I'm sure that everyone's experienced being stuck in traffic and it causing a problem for them. Or I'm sure that everyone's at least had the experience of showing up late because of some circumstance that was outside of their control. Like, this happens to people. I'm sure they're going to understand, right? And you could at least, maybe you could get there to where you're like, maybe not all, but even I would imagine the majority of people know what this is like. They're going to be understanding, or maybe others are even going to be running late because of the same traffic or whatever. But if you think like, I'm sure they'll understand, then your feeling might be you feel more calm. Your action when you get to the meeting might be like a quick apology, and then you just proceed with confidence and business as usual, and you're not rattled by anyone who might have been annoyed that you're late. Notice that I could not put in the result line like, I'm sure they'll understand, and then the result is they all understand that I'm late. I can't put that in the result line. That's their result. That's going to depend on what they're choosing to think and believe. But what I can put in my result line is what I have control over, which is like, okay, I'm not rattled. Maybe a few of them were annoyed, but I'm not going to be rattled by it. Does that make sense? So make sure your result is your result. We don't get to control other people, unfortunately. Okay, darn agency. Okay, the argument, words exchanged with my spouse, we're never going to agree, hopeless. You withdraw, you avoid the issues, you start ruminating and noticing all the ways that you're different and how all the times when you've disagreed and all that. And then you don't find common ground to build on. How else could we think about that? Same circumstance, same words are spoken. You might want to think something like, listen, okay, and of course, this takes some control. This takes stepping away. This takes really managing your brain. But you might get to a point where you can think like, okay, look, I know that all couples disagree. Like, there's no couple that, even happily well-suited couples tend to disagree about things. Like, this is not out of the norm. This doesn't have to be a problem. I'm sure that we're two capable adults. We're committed to this relationship. We're two capable adults that are reasonable and capable of working this out. Okay? And if you choose to say, okay, that's what I'm going to believe. We're capable and we're reasonable. Then you will feel something like feeling capable. Then your action might look something like you withdraw for a time, you cool down, then you go and you address it with more calmness, and you seek to understand the other person's point of view, because you're thinking, I know we're reasonable people. He probably has some good reasons. She has some good reasons. Let me see if I can understand my spouse. And then you're closer to working it out, which stems back to the thought. Okay, how about the weight? There's the number on the scale. Remember, we didn't want to put the number. Why didn't we want to actually put the actual number? You could, because it's factual. But why did we not want to put the actual number in the circumstance line? Do you remember? Because whenever you're putting something in your circumstance line, ideally, it's something that's not going to evoke any emotion for you, right? So even though that number is factual, if you put the number in the circumstance line and it immediately creates emotion in you, then you're like, okay, no, I better tear this down, break this down a little bit more to something that does not stir up emotion in me, okay? So you would just say there's a number on the scale, period.
You should put it in kilograms.
Yeah, kilograms.
What's that again?
I don't even know what that is. Kilograms, whatever. That means nothing to me. That's funny. I'm never going to lose weight, feel discouraged, give up, eat the cookies, don't lose the weight. Stems back to there. So you might want to think something like, okay, I just haven't figured this out yet. So obviously, what I'm doing maybe isn't giving me the results I want. Maybe it's not working. But I know there's got to be something that's going to work. Like, I just haven't figured out what works for my lifestyle, my body, my schedule yet. Like, I'm sure there's a way. And if you think, like, I haven't figured it out yet, curious, there's got to be something. So now I'm kind of curious. And then your action might look like you keep looking for solutions. Maybe you research online. Maybe you ask other people who've lost weight. You keep trying. And then your result is eventually you find what works for yourself and your body. Okay? Stems back to, I haven't figured it out yet, but now I'm finding what works. Yelling, I raise my voice at my kids. These kids deserve better. Shame, you retreat to your room. You leave them to do their homework on their own. You're unengaged during dinner, or you serve cereal, whatever it was. And then you're not being the mom you believe your kids deserve. Now, what I love to point out about this is that here's why the model is so useful. Because sometimes our thoughts seem like lovely thoughts. It's like, the kids deserve better. That seems like, oh, a mom who just wants the best for her kids. And like, they deserve better. You would think like maybe that's going to motivate her to do better or be better. But what we find when we put it into the result line is that it doesn't motivate the change that she wants to see. So notice that anytime you feel shame or you're beating yourself up, you might think somehow that's going to be useful, and it's not. And when you put it into the model, you can see that it doesn't create a useful result. So here's my favorite thought to think, because this is work I did. This is like my real life stuff. I realized that when I raised my voice at my kids, instead of thinking like, I'm a terrible mom, they deserve so much better, I would think to myself, okay, apparently even good moms yell at their kids sometimes. And when I would think that, I would feel confident. Okay, I'm a good mom. I yell at my kids. I don't love that, but even good moms yell at their kids at times. And then I would feel more confident and peaceful about myself. And when I felt that more peace and confidence in my parenting, what it would look like is I would still retreat to my room. I would maybe cool down for a little while. And then when I resurfaced, I would come out and I would apologize to my kids. So sorry I yelled at you like that. Da, 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 da. Mom sometimes make mistakes too. And I would teach them that, you know what? I blow it sometimes too. And I'm just learning to be a mom. You're like, I'm not perfect. I'm so sorry. Da, 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 which I love because I was like, look, I'm modeling to them the process of apologizing, repenting, changing that, right? Who better to model that, right, than me? And then result was I'm being a good mom. But notice, see, a lot of times people want to say like, no, this thought, they deserve better, is what's going to be useful to you because then you're going to be motivated to change. And they're going to say like, no, if you think this thought like, oh, apparently good moms yell at their kids too, you're going to feel justified and you're going to think there's no problem in yelling at your kids and you're just going to continue to yell. Because I don't know why, but sometimes we think that beating ourselves up is the answer, or sort of hating ourselves into a better position is the way to go, and it just doesn't work. So notice that. That's why I love to put my thoughts into a model, because I don't really know what they're creating for me until I put it into a model and really slow it down and notice what's happening when I think that way. Okay, losing money. This is the last one. Let me check the time. Perfect. Okay, losing money. You lost money on a business venture. You were thinking, I'm not good at this. You feel inadequate. So your action sort of looks like you just kind of stop exploring other options or hesitate. You're indecisive. You lack confidence. When that's the action you're taking, then you're not good at recognizing other opportunities. And it stems back to the thought that I'm not good at this. So how else might we want to think about losing money in a business venture? What would be more useful? Any ideas?
I learned a lot of good skills here.
Ding, 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 that's the one I came up with too. There's lots of thoughts, but I put a useful one would be like, I learned a lot from this experience, okay? And if you're thinking, I learned a lot from this experience, you might feel more determined or a little more capable or a little more educated or whatever it is, right? And then your action might look like you continue to look for new opportunities, but this time you recognize some of the pitfalls, you maybe do better research, better planning, you have new strategies because you've learned a lot from the last experience. And then your result is you're better prepared, better equipped at the next attempt, which stems back to like, I've learned a lot and now I'm better equipped. Okay, perfect. So, let me see. I just want to, before I wrap up and hand out the worksheets, just remind you, listen, as you try to move from your unintentional models to your intentional models, and you're practicing and you're starting to redirect your brain, know, like, okay, your brains are so well trained, so they are going to want to go back to the old route all the time. Don't lose hope, don't get discouraged, don't start to think like, no, this doesn't work. This is another one of those things I've tried that didn't work. Have patience with yourself. Just when your brain, you notice that it's not working, it's not sticking, just have some patience. You're like, oh, I've really trained my brain really well and it's working perfectly. But like now I'm going to retrain. Now I'm going to rewire, and it's going to take time, just like it took time to train it this way. Now I've got to have some patience and rewire. It's like potty training a toddler. It's like sometimes there can be nothing more frustrating than potty training a toddler, right? It takes a lot of repetition, it takes a lot of determination, it takes a lot of sticking to it, but in the end it's very worth it, right? So we're going to retrain our brains, and we're going to have patience because it's not an overnight fix, and it takes some time to rewire our brains. So have patience with yourself and just know, like, my brain is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly normal. This is just the way of it. This is just what it takes to practice to start rewiring my brain. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes repetition. It takes kind of falling back and noticing again, or picking a new thought. Maybe that one I thought was going to work isn't really sticking. I've got to find something else. So here's some of the things we're going to do this week. I told you guys I'd bring you a list of feelings. This is, of course, not a completely comprehensive list, but it's pretty good. But when you're filling out your models, just take one and pass it around. When you're filling out your models, the better you can get at really putting the best descriptive feeling in your feeling line, the better it is for you. Because I've noticed that we all tend to have list 4 feelings. I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel frustrated, I feel happy, I feel love, like very basic emotions, right? So this is going to help you get to a better, more descriptive, more accurate feeling that you're feeling. Maybe you're not angry, you're just a little bit bothered. Maybe you're a little disgusted. Maybe you're a little bit disappointed, right? But we tend to just be angry, right? So you want to get really descriptive on your emotion. Then the next worksheet that I have for you is called Taking Full Responsibility, and this is going to help you sort of identify maybe one person in your life that you are now noticing and realizing that you do a lot of delegating responsibility for your emotions too. Oh, interesting. I noticed that I'm kind of turning over my power to this person. And then it's going to step you through some of the questions like, why is that unfair for them? Why is it not useful for you? And just kind of get you to really, just start wiggling that out. Okay, I don't want to do this any longer. So that's what that is. And then this one's much prettier in color, and I'll send out the digital form. So this is what you're probably going to want to use throughout the entire course when you run your models. It's got a space for your thought download, and then your unintentional model, and your intentional model. And so you can make copies, or you can just do it in a notebook or whatever. But if you like it to be pretty and fun, you can print out more of these at home. But this is where we're going to start practicing our intentional models and really taking ownership and redirecting our brain and starting that process of rewiring. Okay. Any questions or comments? Anything you guys want to add to it?
I was just thinking about when you were running the models, I was just thinking about these books that, I don't know if you know about Viktor Frankl.
Yes, yes.
And that was his thought. He was in the
concentration camp.
And he was questioning himself, like, we are in the same situation, sleeping for hours, no clothes, broken shoes,
mistreatment.
Just a soup, like looks like water, but not real food, and a hard bread. And some people are dying. Some people are getting sick. Others are dying. Why? Why? If everyone is like thousands of people going through the same situation, why some are? And there was like their thoughts, because some of them wanted to like, oh, I need to get out of this because I want to see my wife, my husband, my kids. Others who were like really angry and they wanted to give up.
Bitter.
And there was just like their thoughts. And then he realized that we can take away anything, but not our thoughts.
Yeah. They can take it all from me. Yeah, I love that. They can take it all from me. They can control me in every way, but they cannot control my thinking. And that was what made the difference between people who came out and were able to move forward and thrive and use the terrible experience that they went through for positive and for good, and the people who, I mean, we can't blame them. Like, I would probably be one of the ones that would just roll over and die. But you know what I mean? But yeah, I can't remember the name of the book. What was the book? Man's Search for Happiness? Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah, Viktor Frankl. Yeah, I've listened to that a few times. It's so good. Great, perfect example of how everything, the thing is, the truth is most things are outside of our control. But what we really have full control over is our minds and our thoughts. It doesn't feel like that sometimes, but that's why it's a skill. That's why it's thought work. That's why it's something we have to learn and practice. But yes, we can all get better and better and better at that. And of course, like, we're always going to have room to grow. And every time new circumstances come up in our lives, we're going to sort of feel like we've totally regressed. I've noticed that with me. Like, I first came to this work because I was really struggling with certain circumstances in my life, and then it was like, oh my gosh, this was so helpful, so life-changing, got me to such a better place. And then something new would surface in my life, and it would almost feel like, wait, what? Like, I thought I had learned and grown and so much better. But like, no, because every time a new circumstance arises, you kind of in some ways have to just like, oh, no, wait. Because your brain wants to go back to what's natural and what you've already kind of trained it to do. And so it's kind of like a lifelong process. But the nice thing is like, once you have the skills and the ability and you know where to take the focus, you just stop focusing on what's happening outside of you that you don't have control on, and you turn the focus inward on what you do have control on, and then you're back in power. And so even though it's sort of like a lifelong process, none of us just gets to the point where we just have perfectly managed and trained brains, but like, it's empowering to understand it.
I thought it was funny that you used the example of potty training a toddler, because I've gone down this rabbit hole recently of like learning about neural pathways in our brain. And the funny part is that 3-year-olds create neural pathways way faster than we do. So
right?
It's like, as frustrating as that is, like, it's going to be even like more like a long-term project for us, because it has to do with like neuroplasticity is what what neurologists call it. Like, by the time you're 36 or 46 or 56, like, it's a lot harder to create those new neural pathways than it is
when they're little.
When we were 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds. But it is possible. It's just, it takes an insane amount of repetition. Like, this book that I read recently says that you got to do, if you're trying to like create a new neural pathway, you have to do it every single day for 45 days. And you can't just like stop doing an old neural pathway. You have to replace it with something new, which is exactly what you're talking about here with the intentional models. But it's true. Like, I've been doing it for 29 days now. I'm on day 29 for like some like meditation and mindfulness stuff that I've been working on. So, I mean, the research says I still have a few.
You got this. You got this, Dan.
to like make that neural pathway. And the way I always think about it is like, my old neural pathway is kind of like I-10 here. Like, it's like a 4-lane, super highway here. But creating a new neural pathway is like me in the jungle with like a machete, like trying to like
you're like break. Yes, just clear it. It's so much work.
But it takes a lot of repetition and time. But
it is.
It does does work.
It is. I love that too. So if it's frustrating to train a 3-year-old's brain, just have patience with your own. And that's why we call it thought work, because it's like really is work. It really is work, but it's really worth doing, because you're going to learn skills and you're going to change your just your habits and what comes naturally to you over time in a way that you might think, oh, this is just going to benefit me, but it's going to benefit so many people in your life, because what you learn is going to sort of be modeled for your children, and other people are going to be inspired and watch and learn from you and stuff. So it's so cool, because I feel like this is why I love to share it with people, because I feel like the more people who are sort of living on a little more, not better, like none of us is better, I'm not any better than anybody else, but the more of us that are sort of living in a more empowered, higher way of living and thinking, it just sort of raises all tides. So
I would like to share something. You were talking about the brains, and I know that the brain doesn't understand, or it doesn't understand about lies. So I spoke in a sarcasm way. When I used to teach, and I knew that it was like a really hard group to teach, I would just sarcasm, and I would just tell everyone, like, I got the best group ever. This is going to be better. And I know it was like hard. It was hard. I mean, at the beginning, like, oh, they are the best. They are very active, and I'm just gonna redirect their actions or whatever. And I remember that as I speak a lot the same, even though it is a sarcastic
even though it was sarcastic.
Way, I mean, my brain was like, oh, this is the best. This is CC. I'm going to teach this group, and it's going to be great. And I ended up having a great group at the end, and like, wow, how did you do it? Like, I had to just like
tell myself
my brain that it was the best one. And they were like, they didn't do this. I mean, they were like, do like really bad things, and like they didn't do that to me. They're like, there were times that happened things, but not as many as with the other teachers.
Yeah.
So I would try to speak in a sarcasm. Put that way.
And what's interesting is like you were just redirecting your brain, and your brain was like, oh, she keeps repeating this, so like apparently this is what we're looking for, and then it just set off to try and find evidence that what you were thinking was true. And that sarcasm, we know that you could at least somewhat believe it, because you probably had a little bit of belief, because you're like, yeah, no, I know that in some way there's goodness in these kids or whatever. Like you had to at least somewhat believe that, even though it was sarcasm and you maybe didn't quite fully believe it there. That was slightly believable to you, like, no, there's possible that this could be a great coup for kids, and you would use that sarcasm and you just repeat it, and then your brain was like, oh, that's what we're choosing to believe. I bet it's true, and looked for the evidence, and it created that result for you, right? Even though other people were like, I did not have that experience. So that's an awesome example. Cool. Anything else? Okay, well, thanks for coming. This was fun.